The second section of this particular chapter is concerned with defining what philosophy means by concerning ourselves with the etymology of definition, to examine various definition and interpretation of philosophy from different philosophical traditions, and to reflect on the evolving nature of philosophy. Etymologically, philosophy is what? Love of wisdom. Who coined the word philosophy? Who coined? The word philosophy is coined by whom? Pythagoras, right? Pythagoras. Pythagoras lived before most of the pre-Socratic philosophers. He lived in 6th century before the birth of Christ. But philosophy as an organized discipline began by whom? By Pythagoras? No. Philosophy as an organized discipline is started by Milesians. The word philosophy itself is coined by Pythagoras in 6th century BC, and philosophy as an organized discipline is started by the Milesians in the 5th century, after a century in which the word philosophy itself is coined by the Pythagoras, right? The term philosophy was introduced by ancient philosophers. Pythagoras, these early philosophers also understand the fundamental nature of reality, nature of knowledge is the principle underlying natural world. Love of wisdom. Now, we have seen that philosophy is very susceptible to be interpreted in various ways. Right? In order to have a firm grasp of what philosophy is, we need to approach it from the multiplicity of directions. What does philosophy mean from the Western perspective, and what does philosophy from the Eastern perspective? What philosophy means in China or in India or in Japan, or what philosophy means in the Western continent. Western understanding philosophy. Can you? Love of wisdom. It's one rational inquiry. Systematic study of fundamental questions. Metaphysical speculation, ethical inquiry. Critical analysis of concept and belief. Dialogue and discourse. More specifically, the Western understanding philosophy centered around the concept of analysis, logical, conceptual analysis, or dialogue, or discourse. The role of philosophy is to facilitate rational inquiry. Right? But this does not mean that Western tradition of philosophy do not have any value to the metaphysical speculation, but more emphasis is given to rational and systematic inquiry of fundamental questions. Underline fundamental questions. Fundamental questions related to what? Reality, existence of God, knowledge and truth. Question related to such issues is known as fundamental question. Reality, God, knowledge, truth, mind-body relation, or meta-theoretical narratives. Philosophy is understood to be a systematic study of fundamental questions, love of wisdom, and rational systematic inquiry. From the Western perspective, from the Eastern perspective, philosophy is emphasis on what? Systematic inquiry, rational inquiry, and argumentation? No. What philosophy means? Meditation, contemplation, speculation, yoga, etc., right? Hindu philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, Confucian philosophy, Taoism, Jainism, which are many dominant in Eastern continent. The word philosophy is associated with some sort of meditation or contemplation or speculation. What's Hinduism? seeing or perceiving through the act of contemplation or meditations in an attempt to free oneself from the bondage of material world. Buddhist emphasis on suffering. Buddhism. Emphasis on understanding suffering, the cause of suffering, and the path to an end to that particular suffering through the act of contemplation, through the act of meditation, through the act of yoga, etc. Right? So the emphasis on Eastern approach of the definition of philosophy is more focused on meditations, speculations, and personal reflection. The same thing is true you can find in Buddhism, Confucianism, or Hinduism, or Jainism, Zen philosophy, or etc. They share something in common. Philosophy is about detachment from the personal, from the worldly affair, and engage oneself with some sort of meditative approach. Right? Whereas in the Western hemisphere, philosophy is about what? Rational inquiry. It's an argumentative in its nature. Systematic, rational inquiry to underlying thought and experience of human being. Right? So we need to approach it from the Eastern as well as from the Western perspective in order to have a firm, a more comprehensive understanding of what philosophy is. Philosophy is still evolving. In which area philosophy is dominant in the contemporary period? Philosophy, even though we cannot ignore ancient questions, but there are still current questions which are dominant in philosophical studies. The subject matter of philosophy is still expanding. Philosophy has expanded its subject matter beyond traditional areas, namely metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics, where what? They were traditional areas, and whereas current areas, such as what? Philosophy of language, environmental philosophy, philosophy of technology, philosophy of mind, are emerging fields of philosophy, right? Metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics, axiology, are considered to be ancient fields. Philosophy has got an interdisciplinary approach. It engages with other fields such as psychology, neuroscience, linguistics, sociology, anthropology. It deals with fundamental assumptions on which those fields lies. Fundamental assumption and presupposition on which those fields lies. Engagement with social and political issues, revaluation of traditional perspective, integration of global perspective, right? Traditionally, philosophy has been associated or centered around Western perspective. It was Western-centric in its approach, but now it tends to incorporate African philosophy, non-Western philosophical traditions, such as Confucianism or Buddhism, right? This can be taken as an emerging aspect of philosophy. Incorporation of African philosophy, Confucianism, Buddhism, etc., right? It tends to integrate global perspective, engage with emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, virtual reality, or etc. The ethical aspects of those issues can be taken as the field in which philosophy is actively engaged with. Philosophers are actively engaged with, right? Dialogue and collaborations, right? Philosophy of mind, philosophy of science, etc. Neurology. What the nature of philosophy? Unlike natural science discipline, philosophy is characterized by certain features. What makes philosophy from other disciplines? The first is methodology. From chemistry or biology or etc. Philosophy is different in its methodology. We have got scientific method in other sciences, but there is no method as such in philosophy. What is the method in philosophy? Anything goes. Anything goes. There is no strict, hard, and fast method that we need to observe in philosophy. And whereas in empirical science, we have scientific method based on observation, verification, hypothesis, assumptions, etc., right? Whereas in philosophy, anything goes. There is no hard and fast rule that we need to observe in philosophy. The subject matter itself in philosophy, empirical science focus on studying natural world, its phenomena, the K to explain, predict observable phenomena through empirical evidence. Philosophy, on the other hand, address broader range of questions. Subject matter in philosophy is what? Broader, whereas subject matter of empirical science is narrower, or natural world is subject matter, and whereas the subject matter of philosophy is matters such as consciousness. Does consciousness exist independent of human physical brain? Or our consciousness is simply a product of our physical sensation? Right? Morality, free will, and the nature of reality itself is a philosophical questions, right? So the empirical science, subject matter is a natural world, and the subject matter of philosophy is consciousness, free will, and reality. Scope of inquiry, philosophy is broader, whereas empirical science are what? Narrower. Empirical science, they have got specific domains or disciplines, such as psychology, biology, or physics. The scope is limited. And philosophy is characterized by an interdisciplinary, broader scope in its approach. Foundational principles that every empirical science share in common, right? Philosophy is characterized by asking the foundational principles that every empirical science share in common. Verifiability and falsifiability is another criteria by which we can make a distinction between empirical science and philosophy. Empirical science are verifiable. Philosophical questions are not verifiable. Philosophical questions are not falsifiable. But does that mean that philosophical questions do not make any progress? Does it mean that philosophical questions are not verifiable or falsifiable? Mean that there is no progress or development in philosophy? No. Right? Even though there is no verifiability or falsifiability, philosophical questions are constantly evolving, because asking the same question, clarifying, expounding upon those previously posed question itself is a development in philosophy. Clarification of concept itself is considered to be a development in philosophy, right? Even though philosophy cannot offer the answer, it can clarify the questions. Clarification of questions itself is considered to be development in philosophy, right? Philosophy is not verifiable, falsifiable, but it aims to ask the same questions for the purpose of clarifications and conceptual analysis, right? Philosophy is normative, whereas other empirical sciences are what? Descriptive. Normative disciplines ask the question of what? What ought to be? What ought to be? And descriptive questions are what? What is the case? Empirical science primarily focuses on descriptive questions, seeking to explain how things are working in the world, and philosophy engaged in normative inquiries. What ought to be the case? Ethical discussions, right? Historical traditions. Philosophy has rich historical tradition, while influential thinkers shaping the development of ideas over centuries. It often engaged dialogue with past philosophers. Right? So more specifically, in philosophy, we are concerned with historical questions, whereas in empirical science, we're focused on contemporary research and discoveries. Contemporary, very recent discoveries is the focus of empirical sciences, right? But in philosophy, we're questions with the same questions that Plato, Socrates, Thales, and Anaximander used to ask. The same questions, right? Philosophy is concerned more with historical traditions, whereas empirical science is concerned with the recent development, right? But this does not mean that. What are dominant branches of philosophy? We have got 8 main branches of philosophy. Can you mention why we want to study about the branch of philosophy? To introduce and describe the main branches of philosophy: metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, logic, aesthetics, and political philosophy. To provide a brief overview of each branch including its central questions and area of inquiry, to highlight the interconnection and overlap between different branches of philosophy, and to discuss the significance of each branch in understanding the human condition and the world that we live in. Knowing the branch of philosophy. Metaphysics. What is the concern and constants of metaphysics? Concern and constants of metaphysics. Kalkidan, what else? New hand, please. Concern and constants. What kind of question is asked by a metaphysician? Yes, Kalkidan. Very good. And constants such as? What is reality? What is the relationship between mind and body? Does free will exist? Is there a God? These are what? Metaphysical constants, right? The concerns of metaphysics are reality, existence, and ultimate nature of things. And whereas the concern of epistemology, the nature of knowledge, belief, and justification. Knowledge, belief, and justification. What kind of question is asked by epistemology? Questions such as, what is knowledge? How it's acquired? What's the nature of truth? How do you differentiate between justified belief and opinion at their limit to what we can know, etc. Epistemological questions related to knowledge. Ethics. What are the concerns of ethics, morality, values, and how we ought to live? Questions such as what's the nature of morality? How do we determine what's moral, right or wrong, etc. Logic. What is the concern of logic? The concern of logic. Principle of valid reasoning. The principle of valid reasoning and sound argumentations. It asks questions such as what? What makes an argument valid? What are the rules of logical reasoning and how we evaluate the validity and coherence of argument? Validity, central questions. What makes an argument valid? Etc. What makes an argument fallacious? And how we get rid of fallacious arguments from our writing or from our speech or etc. Central question of logic. Aesthetics. The concern of aesthetics, beauty, art, and aesthetic experience. What is art? What makes something beautiful? And how do we evaluate, interpret artistic work? What's the relation between aesthetics and ethics, etc. Political philosophy, governance, power, and social organization concerns. What is the ideal form of government? And what are the rights and responsibilities of individuals within societies? Are the kind of questions posed by political philosophy. Philosophy of mind and philosophy of science are considered to be more recent as compared to the earliest one. Metaphysics, epistemology, logic are what? Earliest branches of philosophy. And whereas philosophy of mind and philosophy of science are supposed to be recent branch of philosophy, which emerged after the medieval period in the hands of Immanuel Kant and George William Friedrich Hegel. And Friedrich Nietzsche and Martin Heidegger are considered to be the founder of philosophy of mind, which is the more recent younger branches of philosophy as compared to metaphysics, ethics, and epistemology, right? Philosophy of mind, the concern of philosophy of mind is what? The nature of consciousness. Nature of consciousness, mental states. Right? Is there any relationship between our consciousness and our physical brain? It's a philosophical speculation. It's not open for verification or observations. Mind-body relationship. What is consciousness and how does it arise? And what's the relationship between mind and brain? Can machines or computer possess consciousness? Are mental states reducible to physical state? These are kind of questions posed by the philosophy of mind, philosophy of science, the nature and method and limit of scientific inquiry. To what extent the scientist can know what is scientific knowledge and how is it different from other form of knowledge, and what is the scientific method, how do scientific theories develop and evolve, etc. This is the philosophy, the question of philosophy of science, right? Why do we study philosophy? What's the relevance of philosophy? What does it contribute to our personal growth? What is the importance of philosophy? The study of the relevance of philosophy. Develop. What does it contribute to our personal well-being? Developing our critical thinking habit. Developing our critical thinking habit. Philosophy encourages us to think critically and questions our assumptions. By engaging with philosophical ideas, we can learn to analyze arguments, evaluate evidence, make informed decisions. These skills are valuable in various aspects of life: problem-solving, decision-making, engaging in debate or discussions. Study of philosophy can contribute to our personal growth. It will enable us to examine our personal values and ethics. To examine our personal values and ethics. Philosophy helps us to reflect on our values, beliefs, and ethical principles. It encourages us to ask questions about what is right and wrong, what constitutes a good life, how to live ethically. By engaging with those ethical theories and considering different perspectives, we can develop a clearer understanding of our own values. Clearer understanding of our own values, right? The study of philosophy does not force us, it does not coerce us to accept certain things at the expense of the other, but it enables us to critically evaluate our own firmly, deeply rooted belief systems, right? It will expose us to various constellation or collection of frameworks that will enable us to deal with certain dilemmas, cultivating self-awareness, finding meaning and purpose, navigating moral dilemmas, appreciating diverse perspective. Philosophy exposes us to a wide range of ideas and perspectives from different cultures and time period. This exposure can help us to cultivate open-mindedness and tolerance, enabling us to appreciate diverse viewpoints and engage respectful dialogue with others. Right? This is what philosophy can contribute to our personal development. In societal level, what does philosophy can contribute? Personal level, it will enable us to develop our critical thinking skill and expose us to various constellations of moral frameworks that will enable us to evaluate ethical dilemmas. In societal level, examining the role of philosophy. In societal level, philosophy enables us to examine the foundational principle upon which our social, economic, and political assumptions lies. Examining the meta-narrative level or the foundational level in which our economic, social, and political assumptions, fundamental questions lies. To examine the role of philosophy and critiquing existing system. Philosophical analysis allows for critical examination of existing social system, considering alternative philosophical framework. Ethical considerations, social contract theory, cultural critics, right? To the base of objective of the study of philosophy is to enable us to expose to the various constellations of moral frameworks that will enable us to evaluate fundamental assumptions upon which our everyday thinking and our everyday action is based. Social contract theories such as Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau explore the legitimacy of political authority. What is right and obligation of the state? What is the right and obligation of citizens? What is the relationship between citizen and state, and what ought to be the case, and etc. This is the political philosophy or social contractarians are trying to address, right? So it exposes us to the various constellation of normative issues. Cultural critics. It engaged in cultural critique, examining beliefs, values, and norms that shapes societies, right? Philosophy is understood in various way in different period of times and in the hands of different logicians, right? But what is unanimously agreed to be the definition of philosophy is something that needs to be our focus in this particular course, right? In the last section of this slide, you can find list of certain reference and a list of certain websites that can provide information and resource to help you understand the various aspects of philosophy, about the nature of philosophy or branches of philosophy, or if you want to learn more about the earliest pre-Socratic philosophies, you can look into those listed sites and you can download the reference book, which are freely accessible online, right? From bookz.org or from bookfee.org, bookfee.org or bookz.org, free online database. You can download if you want to know, read more about what philosophy is, the relevance of the study of philosophy, the role of philosophy in contemporary issues, or etc. Right? List of books at the end of chapter.